Commander Alexei Volkov stood motionless on the bridge of the UHS Defender, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the approaching death. 300 Zephyrian warships hung in the void beyond Earth's outer defense grid like crystalline monuments to conquest, beautiful, terrible, and utterly merciless. 12 years. 12 years of peaceful coexistence had made the galaxy forget what humans truly were beneath their veneer of civilization. "Sir," Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez called from her communications station, her voice tight with controlled fear. "The Zephyrian commander is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding our unconditional surrender." Alexei's weathered face betrayed nothing. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency that had become second nature during humanity's long peace. They looked like traders, explorers, scientists, anything but the descendants of Earth's apex predators. The Zephyrians had studied humans for months, watching their farming colonies, their research stations, their merchant fleets. They had seen weakness where they should have recognized restraint. The Zephyrian Empire had dominated the galaxy for over 3 centuries. Their crystalline exoskeletons could deflect most energy weapons, their plasma cannons could crack planetary crusts, and their tactical doctrine had never known defeat. 47 star systems had fallen before their advance, each conquest adding to their legend of invincibility. They had never faced humans at war. "Open a channel," Alexei commanded, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had seen too much death and dealt too much of it in return. The holographic projector shimmered to life, revealing the imposing form of High Commander ZYX Thak. The alien's forearms spread wide in the traditional gesture of Zephyrian dominance, his crystalline carapace gleaming with bioluminescent war patterns that had once struck terror into the hearts of entire civilizations. "Primitive mammals," ZYX Thak's voice resonated through the universal translator with the confidence of 3 centuries of conquest. "You have harbored the rebel colonies of Kepler 442 in defiance of imperial decree. Surrender them to us, and we will grant your species the honor of serving the Zephyrian Empire as labor drones. Resist, and we will demonstrate why 47 worlds kneel before our might." Alexei smiled, a cold, predatory expression that made several bridge officers unconsciously step back. It was a smile that belonged on the face of a hunting wolf, not a spacefaring diplomat. Even through the holographic connection, something primal in that expression made ZYX Thak's bioluminescent patterns flicker with uncertainty. "High Commander," Alexei said with the politeness of a man declining a dinner invitation, "I'm afraid I have to respectfully decline your generous offer." ZYX Thak's crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. No species had ever refused surrender when faced with the full might of the Imperial fleet. "You refuse? Your pathetic species has wallowed in peace for over a decade. Your warriors have grown soft, your weapons obsolete. We have studied your kind, farmers, merchants, researchers. We have conquered civilizations far more advanced than your primitive colonies." Alexei's smile widened, revealing teeth that suddenly seemed far too sharp for a peaceful explorer. "That's where you're wrong, High Commander. We haven't been at peace. We've been dormant." He turned to his communications officer without breaking eye contact with the alien commander. "Lieutenant, send authorization code Omega-7 to all human colonies, all reserve fleets, and all sleeper units. Priority Alpha. Unrestricted propagation." "Code transmitted, sir." The words hung in the air like a funeral bell. Across human space, a signal that hadn't been broadcast in 12 years began its inexorable journey to every human settlement, every hidden cache, every carefully maintained secret that the galaxy had never suspected existed. On farming worlds, colonists put down their agricultural tools and walked with purposeful strides to concealed weapon depots that had been maintained in perfect condition for over a decade. On research stations, scientists sealed their laboratories and moved to combat positions they had drilled in secret every month for 12 years. On the frontier colonies, entire families began the methodical, practiced process of transforming their peaceful settlements into fortress worlds that could hold against any siege. The humans weren't just waking up from their long sleep. They were remembering what they had been born to do, and what they had spent 12 years of apparent peace preparing to do again. Dr. Elena Kowalski had been conducting routine xenobiology research on Europa Station when the activation code reached her through the quantum communication array. The moment the signal touched her neural pathways, she felt the change. Not just in her mind, but in her very cells, as if her DNA was suddenly remembering instructions it had kept hidden for over a decade. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing became controlled, measured. The persistent headache from staring at microscopic samples vanished, replaced by a clarity of thought that was both familiar and terrifying. The Zephyrians had made a catastrophic error in their intelligence gathering. They had observed humans during peacetime, when the dormancy genes were fully active, suppressing the combat instincts that had carried humanity through millions of years of evolutionary warfare on the most hostile planet in known space. Dr. Kowalski, her research assistant, a young Altarian named Veltar, approached with obvious concern, his gill slits fluttering nervously. Your bio readings have changed dramatically in the past 17 minutes. Your adrenaline production has increased by 300%, your reaction time has improved by 45%, your muscle tension has optimized for combat readiness, and your brain is showing massively increased activity in regions associated with tactical thinking, threat assessment, and what our computers can only classify as predatory pattern recognition. Elena looked at her reflection in the lab's polished metal surface and barely recognized herself. Her brown eyes had gained an intensity that hadn't been there an hour ago, the focused gaze of a hunter evaluating prey. Her movements had become economical, precise, with every gesture serving a tactical purpose. Even her posture had changed, unconsciously adopting the balanced stance of someone ready to fight or flee at a moment's notice. Veltar, she said, her voice carrying a new authority that made the gentle Altarian take an involuntary step backward. You need to understand something fundamental about human biology. We're not actually a peaceful species. We're a species that became so extraordinarily efficient at warfare that we had to evolve biological mechanisms to turn those abilities off during times of peace. She pulled up a holographic display showing human genetic markers, her fingers dancing across the controls with newfound speed and precision. Every human in the galaxy carries dormant combat genes, enhanced reflexes that can dodge projectiles, pattern recognition that can predict enemy movements 3 steps ahead, pain tolerance that allows us to fight through injuries that would incapacitate most species, tactical intuition that turns battlefield chaos into readable information, and something we call threat escalation response. The ability to become exponentially more dangerous as situations become more dire. Veltar's compound eyes dilated with growing alarm. But humans have been peaceful for 12 years. Your species runs agricultural colonies, conducts scientific research, operates the galaxy's most successful merchant networks. Exactly 12 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Elena interrupted, her awakened mind automatically calculating the precise duration. In human evolutionary terms, that's less than a single heartbeat. We didn't become peaceful, Veltar. We became dormant. The genes that made us the apex predators of a Class 5 death world didn't disappear. They just went to sleep, waiting for the right signal to wake them up again. Across Europa Station, every human was undergoing the same fundamental transformation. The maintenance chief, who had been contentedly fixing environmental systems, was now mentally calculating the most efficient ways to convert life support into area denial weapons. The cafeteria manager was unconsciously cataloging which food supplies could be weaponized or used to create improvised explosives. The kindergarten teacher was instinctively identifying defensive positions and evacuation routes, while simultaneously assessing which areas of the station would provide optimal cover for the children under her care. They were all still the same people they had been an hour ago. Scientists, engineers, teachers, administrators. But now they were awake. And with that awakening came the remembered knowledge of what it truly meant to be human in a galaxy full of threats. The peaceful researchers had become something far more dangerous. Human beings who remembered they were the children of warriors. Captain Marcus Thompson had been commanding the cargo freighter UHS Prosperity on a routine supply run between the Centauri colonies when the activation code reached his ship through the emergency communication channels. The transformation began in his bridge crew first. Their casual banter died mid-sentence, replaced by the crisp efficiency of a military unit that had never forgotten its training. Within 17 minutes of receiving the signal, His ship had begun its metamorphosis from a peaceful merchant vessel into something that would have terrified the galaxy's military analysts, had they been watching. Captain, his navigator, an insectoid Threx named Kliktar, observed with mounting alarm as his compound eyes tracked the crew's movements. The behavior patterns of your species mates have changed drastically. They're moving with military precision, communicating in abbreviated tactical code, and they've begun systematically modifying ship systems without waiting for orders or authorization. Marcus nodded, feeling the familiar weight of command responsibility settle on his shoulders like an old, perfectly fitted uniform. The sensation was both comforting and deeply unsettling. It had been 12 years since he'd felt this clarity of purpose, this absolute certainty about what needed to be done. They're not modifying systems randomly, Kliktar, he explained, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had once commanded far deadlier vessels than cargo haulers. They're optimizing them for combat effectiveness. Every human learns basic military engineering as part of standard education, even those who never intend to serve in military roles. In the cargo hold, Chief Engineer Lisa Park was directing 3 other crew members in converting their industrial fabricators into ammunition production units. Their cargo of rare earth metals and manufacturing components, materials that had seemed perfectly innocent 12 hours ago, was being rapidly transformed into armor plating, projectile cores, and electronic warfare components with an efficiency that spoke of years of hidden preparation. "Sir," Weapons Officer James Mitchell called from what had been the primary communications array 30 minutes earlier. "I've completed the primary conversion sequence. We now have a fully functional plasma cannon array with 360-degree coverage and targeting systems integrated with our navigation sensors. Secondary conversion will give us defensive screens and point defense capabilities within the hour." Kliktar's antennae twitched with nervous energy. How is this transformation possible? This was classified as a civilian vessel. Your ship's registration listed no military capabilities whatsoever. Marcus smiled grimly, an expression that would have looked perfectly at home on the face of an ancient human warrior preparing for battle. "No human vessel is ever truly civilian, Kliktar. We learned that lesson in the bloodiest possible way during our early expansion into space. Peace is a luxury you can only afford when you're constantly prepared for war." He gestured toward the view screen, where other human ships were broadcasting recognition signals that revealed their true nature. "Every human vessel is built with rapid military conversion protocols. Every human settlement can transform into a fortress within hours. Every human civilian is a soldier who just hasn't received activation orders yet." The transformation wasn't unique to the Prosperity. Across human space, the galaxy's most successful merchant fleet was revealing capabilities that had been carefully hidden for over a decade. Cargo vessels sprouted weapon arrays that had been disguised as sensor equipment. Passenger liners deployed armor plating that had been camouflaged as decorative hull sections. Research ships began broadcasting tactical coordination data, their scientific sensor arrays proving to be military-grade surveillance systems. Mining ships that had spent years peacefully extracting resources from asteroid belts suddenly revealed themselves to be mobile weapons platforms. Agricultural transports began deploying defensive screens that could deflect military-grade plasma fire. Even the humble interplanetary shuttles that carried families and tourists between worlds started broadcasting tactical data and forming coordinated defensive networks. The Zephyrians had spent months studying what they believed was a peaceful trading civilization. They were discovering, far too late, that they had awakened a military machine that had been quietly spreading throughout the galaxy, disguised as merchants and explorers, for decades. High Commander ZYX Thack stood in the crystalline command chamber of his flagship, reviewing tactical reports that defied every principle of warfare his species had mastered over 3 centuries of conquest. The holographic displays surrounding him painted a picture that should have been impossible. His overwhelming force was being systematically dismantled by what should have been defenseless prey. "Status report," he demanded, his bioluminescent war patterns flickering with agitation as his 4 arms gestured at the tactical displays. Senior intelligence analyst Krelvor's exoskeleton had shifted to the pale blue of extreme stress. "Sir, our advanced battle groups report unprecedented tactical anomalies." The human colonies aren't defending their population centers according to any known military doctrine. Instead, they've evacuated all non-combatants to heavily fortified positions and converted their abandoned cities into elaborate kill zones. They're using their own infrastructure as weapons against us. HFY's crystalline carapace darkened to deep purple, a sign of extreme agitation that his crew had rarely witnessed. Elaborate. The humans appear to have anticipated our battle strategies with impossible precision, sir. They've studied our previous 47 conquest campaigns and prepared specific countermeasures for every tactical doctrine we've ever employed. Their defensive positions are geometrically designed to channel our energy weapons into absorption matrices, negating our primary advantage. Their counterattacks target structural weaknesses in our exoskeletons that should be classified information. On the main tactical display, HFY watched in mounting horror as his 7th Assault Fleet, veterans of 12 successful planetary conquests, was being systematically destroyed by human defenders who seemed to predict every move before his commanders even made their decisions. The mammals fought unlike anything in his extensive military experience, not with the honor-bound dueling traditions of the warrior castes, not with the overwhelming numerical superiority of hive minds, but with a cold, calculating efficiency that transformed every element of their environment into a weapon of war. They're not fighting like a conventional military force, his tactical advisor reported, her voice carrying the tremor of someone witnessing something that violated fundamental assumptions about warfare. They're fighting like an apex predator species that evolved by successfully hunting creatures more dangerous than themselves. That observation triggered something in HFY's memory banks. He accessed historical records, searching for the original survey data on humanity's homeworld. The file, buried deep in military archives and largely ignored, painted a picture that suddenly explained everything with terrifying clarity. Earth classification: Class 5 Death World. Gravity 1.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric composition toxic to 67% of known species. Geological instability rating extreme. Dominant predators. Classified as inadvisable to engage militarily. Survey recommendation: any species capable of achieving technological civilization on this planetary environment should be considered a potential galactic-level threat if provoked to warfare. The report had been filed away centuries ago, dismissed as the paranoid ramblings of overly cautious surveyors. The Zephyrian Empire, like most galactic powers, had assumed that the softening influence of civilization would have eliminated whatever savage instincts had once driven these creatures. They were learning, with devastating clarity, that some evolutionary advantages run deeper than culture, deeper than technology, deeper than the veneer of peaceful coexistence. "Sir," his communications officer announced with barely controlled panic, "we're receiving surrender demands from the human forces." HFY stared at the tactical display where his supposedly superior fleet was being outmaneuvered by creatures that had turned warfare into a science. "Surrender demands? From them?" "Yes, sir. They're offering to accept our unconditional surrender and guarantee the safety of all Zephyrian personnel who comply immediately." For the first time in 3 centuries of military dominance, a Zephyrian high commander found himself seriously considering surrender to what he had assumed was inferior prey. Admiral Rebecca Chun commanded the human response fleet from the bridge of the UHS Retribution, a vessel whose very name carried the weight of humanity's awakened fury. Unlike the elegant Zephyrian warships with their graceful crystalline architectures that spoke of conquest through beauty, human vessels were built like the weapons they truly were: angular, brutal, and utterly functional. Every line served a purpose. Every surface was optimized for survival in the hostile environment of space warfare. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake reported from her tactical station, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone who had drilled for this moment every day for 12 years. Zephyrian fleet composition analysis confirms they're still employing standard Imperial conquest protocols. They haven't adapted to our defensive patterns or tactical innovations. Rebecca studied the 3-dimensional holographic battle map that dominated the center of her bridge, her augmented reality implants overlaying probability matrices and tactical projections across the display. The Zephyrian fleet formed the traditional conquest formation, overwhelming force arranged to inspire surrender through sheer intimidation. It was a strategy that had worked flawlessly across 47 star systems. It was also precisely what her species had spent the last decade preparing to counter. They're making the fundamental mistake that every apex predator species eventually makes, she mused, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had studied warfare as both science and art. They think war is about being stronger, faster, more heavily armed. Humans learned long ago that war is actually about being smarter, more adaptable, and more willing to sacrifice for victory. Her fleet wasn't the largest or most heavily armed in the galaxy. The Zephyrians still held those distinctions. But it was something far more dangerous than raw firepower. It was infinitely adaptable. Every human ship could be rapidly reconfigured for different tactical roles within hours. Every crew member was cross-trained in multiple specialties, capable of seamlessly transitioning between functions as battlefield conditions changed. Every weapon system could be modified, upgraded, or completely repurposed using nothing more than standard fabrication equipment and human ingenuity. Begin implementation of Strategic Protocol Omega, Rebecca ordered, her words carrying across encrypted channels to every human commander in the sector. Across human space, what had appeared to be desperate last stands at strategically important worlds suddenly revealed themselves to be components of an elaborate trap that had been 12 years in the making. Human forces that had seemed to be retreating in panic were actually executing precisely choreographed maneuvers, drawing Zephyrian fleets into carefully prepared killing fields where every asteroid, every derelict station, every piece of space debris had been weaponized. The Zephyrians possessed superior individual firepower and stronger defensive capabilities, but humans had evolved something far more deadly: the ability to fight as a single, coordinated organism spanning multiple star systems. Information flowed between human forces with startling efficiency through quantum-encrypted communication networks. Tactical innovations developed during desperate fighting on one world were instantly transmitted to every other battlefield, allowing the entire human military to adapt and evolve in real time. Individual human units made seemingly suicidal sacrifices without hesitation, not from blind courage, but from precise calculation. Their deaths would provide critical intelligence that would save hundreds of lives elsewhere. Each sacrifice was part of a larger strategy, each loss carefully measured against potential gains. The galaxy's greatest military power was discovering what it meant to face a species that had transformed warfare from a contest of strength into a precise, ruthless science, and had spent over a decade preparing for exactly this moment. Colonel David Morrison stood in the ruins of New Geneva, surveying the shattered remnants of what had once been the crown jewel of human colonial architecture. Crystalline debris from destroyed Zephyrian war machines glittered among the twisted metal of human defensive positions, creating a battlefield mosaic that spoke of desperate fighting and ultimate victory. Around him, his soldiers moved with the efficient purpose of warriors who had remembered their true nature, but the cost of that remembering was written in every line of their faces. The awakening had brought back humanity's capacity for war, but it had also brought back the weight of what war truly meant. "Sir," Sergeant Rachel Torres approached, her powered armor scarred and blackened from 3 days of continuous urban combat. "Casualty reports from all defensive sectors are compiled and ready for your review." David accepted the data pad with hands that remained steady despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm him. The awakening had enhanced their physical capabilities, but it hadn't eliminated their humanity. Each name on the casualty list represented not just a strategic loss, but a person who had answered the call to remember what their species was capable of, and paid the ultimate price for that knowledge. "Acceptable losses within projected parameters," he murmured, applying the dispassionate analysis that had become second nature since the activation codes had awakened the tactical centers of his brain. Human casualties were significant but sustainable, and more importantly, they had achieved something the galaxy thought impossible. They had forced the Zephyrian Empire to consider surrender. "Colonel," Torres continued, her voice carrying a note of confusion that David had been hearing from many of his subordinates, "the Zephyrian prisoners are requesting to speak with you directly. They seem confused by our treatment of them." David made his way through the temporary detention facility that his engineers had constructed in the basement of what had once been New Geneva's cultural center. Inside, he found High Commander Zuexthak and several of his surviving officers, all looking remarkably well-fed and healthy for prisoners of war. Their wounds had been treated by human medics, their nutritional requirements met according to Zephyrian biological needs, and they had been provided with communication devices to contact their surviving fleet elements. You treat prisoners with more consideration than many species show their own citizens, HFY observed, his crystalline features shifting to colors that David's tactical briefings had identified as indicating philosophical confusion. This behavior pattern is inconsistent with your demonstrated military capabilities. We came to enslave your people to reduce your species to labor drones. Why do you show us mercy? David sat across from the crystalline commander, removing his helmet to reveal a face marked by exhaustion and the weight of command decisions that had cost lives. Because war isn't personal for us, High Commander. It's practical. We don't fight because we hate our enemies or because we enjoy violence. We fight because circumstances make it necessary for our survival. But your species demonstrates such devastating efficiency at combat operations. Your soldiers follow orders that result in their deaths without hesitation. How do you maintain such restraint when you clearly possess the capability for total destruction? David gestured toward the window, where human medics were treating wounded Zephyrians alongside their own people, and human engineers were already beginning the process of rebuilding the destroyed sections of the city. Because we learned something your people haven't discovered yet, High Commander. We learned that being exceptionally good at war means understanding precisely when to stop fighting. HFY's exoskeleton shifted to a contemplative silver that David had learned indicated deep thought among his species. Your people, you evolved beyond the need for war while simultaneously perfecting your ability to wage it. We evolved because of war, David corrected gently. Every human carries the genetic memory of 10,000 years of conflict, of survival against impossible odds on a world that tried to kill us every day. We know exactly what war costs, not just in resources or territory, but in the fundamental humanity we risk losing each time we awaken these capabilities. He stood, looking out at the mixed human and Zephyrian medical teams working together in the ruins. Which is why we try so desperately to avoid it. But when someone forces war upon us, he shrugged, the gesture carrying the weight of inevitability. We remember what we were born to do, and we do it with the efficiency that kept our species alive on the most hostile world in known space. 6 months after the Zephyrian War's conclusion, Ambassador Elena Kowalski stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the magnificent crystal amphitheater of Nexus Prime, representing humanity's first official petition for membership in the galaxy's oldest interstellar governing body. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was the same xenobiologist who had awakened on Europa Station to discover what her species truly was beneath their peaceful facade. Honored representatives, she addressed the assembled delegates of 43 species with the diplomatic grace that had replaced her scientists' casual manner. The question before us today is not whether humans represent a potential threat to galactic stability. Recent events have definitively answered that question. The real question is how humanity's demonstrated capabilities can best serve the greater good of all civilized species. The aftermath of the Zephyrian War had sent shockwaves throughout every corner of known space. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, previously undefeated in 3 centuries of expansion, conquerors of 47 star systems, the galaxy's undisputed military superpower, had been forced to surrender unconditionally within 4 months of engaging human forces. Even more shocking to the galactic community was humanity's restrained response to total victory. They had demanded no territorial concessions, no tribute payments, no subjugation of Zephyrian colonies. Their only requirements were formal recognition of human sovereignty and ironclad guarantees of non-interference with human settlements. Your species deeply concerns us, Ambassador Kowalski, admitted Speaker Velkoth of the Altarian Federation, his gill slits fluttering with barely concealed anxiety. You have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our most advanced civilizations, tactical innovations that render traditional warfare obsolete, and a level of coordination that suggests your entire species functions as a single military organism. Yet you claim to desire nothing more than peaceful coexistence. Elena nodded, understanding the fear that her presence represented to species who had built their civilizations on assumptions about the balance of power that humans had shattered completely. We understand your concerns, Speaker Velkoth, and we don't dismiss them lightly. But I ask you to consider the evidence of our true intentions. For 12 years, humans lived alongside 42 different species without any of you suspecting our actual capabilities. We traded fairly, conducted beneficial scientific research, operated the galaxy's most reliable merchant networks, and built genuine friendships with individuals from dozens of worlds. She activated a holographic display showing human population distribution and infrastructure development across 17 star systems. There are now human settlements throughout this sector of the galaxy, with more than 2 billion humans living permanently in space-based colonies. We've been expanding peacefully for over a century, contributing to galactic civilization in countless ways. Our military awakening was an aberration forced upon us by external aggression, not our natural state of being. High Commander ZYX Thak, now serving as the Zephyrian Empire's ambassador to the Council, rose from his crystalline seat. His presence carried weight. He was the only military commander in galactic history to survive engaging humans in warfare. I can personally attest to humanity's extraordinary restraint in victory. They could have annihilated my entire fleet, conquered our homeworld, enslaved our population. Instead, they disabled our vessels with minimal casualties, treated our wounded with the same care they showed their own, and immediately began peace negotiations the moment we indicated willingness to surrender. What guarantee can you provide? Asked the Threx representative, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like worried jewels. That humans won't eventually use their military superiority to dominate other species. Your capabilities make conquest trivially easy. Elena smiled. The expression that had once seemed predatory now appeared genuinely warm and reassuring. Because domination is fundamentally inefficient, representative. Humans learned this lesson through millennia of internal conflict on our homeworld. Cooperation produces exponentially better results than conquest. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to be full participants in galactic civilization. She paused, meeting the gaze of each representative in turn. But we also want the galaxy to understand that human peace isn't the result of human weakness. We've been dormant, not defenseless. And now that you know what we're truly capable of, perhaps we can all work together to ensure that those capabilities are never needed again. The vote to admit humanity to full membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous. Not because the other species trusted humans completely, but because they understood that having humanity inside the system was infinitely preferable to having them outside it.